Learning is a fundamental skill necessary for growth. Consequently, researchers have spent years establishing the most effective learning methods. Students who generate their own questions and answers to learn material, as opposed to passively reading, are more likely to recognise and recall information later. This is because we remember information better when we have taken an active role in producing it, and therefore recalling and encoding it. This phenomenon is known as the generation effect. The generation effect has been demonstrated as a superior learning technique in a variety of disciplines. For example, in an experiment involving simple and complex mathematical problems, learners were presented with an index card, either displaying a multiplication problem and answer, forming the read condition, or the multiplication problem only, forming the generate condition. Learners in the generate condition were required to read the problem, calculate the answer, and then recall this answer aloud, whereas learners in the read condition were merely required to read the problem and answer aloud from the index card. In the generate condition, learners were presented with the complete index card for each problem after they had generated the answer themselves. Results demonstrated participants in the generate condition recalled more answers to the mathematical problems than those in the read condition. The generation effect may take many forms, including learners generating their own questions, paraphrasing their own answers, and filling in fragments of missing words as opposed to merely reading them, just to name a few. Learners see the short-term benefit of simply reading material, and so typically are not motivated to engage in these generation strategies. For instance, in a study where participants either read a passage of text 4 times, read a passage 3 times and tested themselves once, or read a passage once and were tested 3 times, after 5 minutes, learners who simply read the passage repeatedly did have the greatest learning benefit. However, after 1 week, learners who read the passage once and were tested 3 times had the most memorization of the passage contents. Let's take a look at a more practical example. Here we see Jane studying at her desk. She spent a long time copying and pasting her exam notes into a document, which she's now printed out. As we can see, she's studying very hard for her big psychology exam, highlighting everything that she thinks is important to know for the final exam. Let's see how she goes. Oh no, this totally wasn't the result she was expecting. But she studied so hard. What went wrong? Now, let's have a look at how the generation effect can be applied when students do their revision. This is Mary, who is busy preparing for her final exam. She has 13 chapters of material to study. She is currently practicing generating questions for each of the chapters that is accessible. She can ask her friend to help her by asking the questions for her. She revises the questions over and over again, and finally she is ready for her exam. Yay! Mary receives better grades in her final exam, 97 out of 100. This is awesome! Mary feels satisfied with her grade and she is confident with the techniques she used for her revision. This is an example of how the technique of the generation effect can help students achieve better grades. So what is the benefit of the generation effect? It is clear there are educational implications. As we saw, Jane was very disappointed by her mark on the latest psychology exam. She studied for just as long as Mary, and yet they received dramatically different results. It is a common misconception that endless rereading of material is more productive than learners generating their own resources. When you are actively involved with the learning process, it is easier to remember this information later. This is because it involves a different kind of encoding process in memory. When you ask yourself a question, you are generating the information from your mind. That involves different pieces of memory and knowledge and makes it easier for you to remember the content. The generation effect can be strengthened by increasing the retrieval and recalling of information time by time. Hence, it can strengthen the connections in the brain and therefore promotes learning. So, with limited time and resources, it is important we use effective strategies such as generation technique in learning material to ensure we retain that information in the future.